Hello, thank you for joining me once again. I am continuing the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. We are on chapter 10. This is part 3. Please subscribe if you have not. Welcome to the new subscribers. And everyone, please hit that like button so that others can hear this valuable information. So let's get started on page 141. Contemplated. Here is a good analogy to contemplate for now. Cause and effect works something like ripples in a pond. You throw in a rock and see the concentrate circles go out from the point that the rock entered the pond. Most people only realize the rock was thrown in the pond. They don't pay attention to what happens with the ripples. Even those who see the original ripples usually don't see beyond them. But if you watch the ripples closely and keep following them, you see that the ripples may reach a shore or a large rock in the pond, and then they bounce off and start making new ripples. And then the new ripples may even interact with the original ripples or make some reflective ripples themselves. Human events are much like these ripples. One action sets an entire series of other actions into motions. And our ripples are interesting with other people's ripples. Our ripples are interacting with other people's ripples. These actions can be very elaborately complicated. For instance, let's look at the example of the beggar in the street that we used earlier. We said one scenario would be you gave him the money. He got warm clothes, a new livelihood, etc., and lived happily ever after. Wonderful. That would seem to be a positive outcome then, right? But let's follow the ripples further. What if his new livelihood was making a special kind of glass that was impervious to changes in heat and cold that subsequently enabled scientists to develop a new chemical for killing insects on farm plants in order to help feed more people? But instead, the chemical had an unknown reaction that began a process of some kind that created weather or solar changes that started ruining the food plants or created new diseases. Many such things are in the ancient prophecies and much, much more. And there will be such so-called innocent people being part of these developments. Or in another scenario, with the poor street person, what if you helped him and he lived happily ever after and had children, and one of his children became a lawyer who turned out to be the next Hitler? Altering cause and effect is a very complicated matter with very serious implications. And unfortunately, everyone is constantly altering it just by all the things they do in their day-to-day lives. And they are altering things by thinking and acting from the virtually blind point of view of all of these separate self. Prophecy can be learned. Using discipline and concentration, techniques of contemplation can be used to trace and interpret the complex ripple patterns of cause and effect. These techniques allow the outcome of events to be seen partially or sometimes all the way in their final outcome. But like medical school, there is a prerequisite into getting into the school of the prophets. You must also transcend the limited view of the separate self. Then you'll know all things that are going to happen in the future, including about your own life. And isn't that fate again, not free will? Both. Don't forget, it is a paradox, but also know this: there are two fields of prophecy. The first is the prediction of predestined events. The second is the prediction of events that are yet to be determined because they involve the free will choices of one or more individuals. The outcome of a situation involving free will choice is difficult to predict at best, because you never know for sure what a person might choose because they have free will. Thus, prophecy involving free will becomes what might be considered in gambling terms as an odds on betting games, or in scientific terms as a probability factor. For example, when free will is involved, you won't be able to predict that such and such will happen for certain, but you may be able to determine that there is an 85% probability that it will happen, a 45% probability that it will happen in a certain way, and a 30% probability that it will happen another way, etc. Predicting a free will choice becomes easier to call and more accurate if there are factors that exist that will make the person lean one way or another. For instance, let's say Jack is going to drive by a Chinese hitchhiker tomorrow, and you want to predict whether or not Jack is going to pick up the hitchhiker. Let's also say that we know that Jack is not inclined to pick up hitchhikers and usually doesn't, but he has done it before on rare occasions. There is a leaning that makes it more likely that he will not pick up the hitchhiker. We'll say there's maybe a 5 to 10% probability that he will, given other factors we know about. But if you combine that leaning with a stronger leaning, such as knowing that Jack also hates Chinese people, he almost definitely not going to pick up the Chinese hitchhiker, yet he still could. Phew, and that example was nothing. First grade level stuff in prophecy school. Then there are the situations and events that do not involve free will choices and can be seen and predicted for certain. Such is the case with earth changes. Humans have caused such an imbalance as the result of their past free will choices that certain things will happen within the earth, even if all beings make free will choices to try and repair the damage. Sadly, it's beyond the point of no return, and it's just a matter of time before the ripples in the pond finish their journey. Don't forget, though, we can still change our own lives, and the effects of these things which are past the point of no return can be altered in various ways. Some prophecies involve a mix of predestined events and free will choices. These type of things are very complex. Some aspects of the outcome will be certain, but there will be variations of the outcome that are influenced by the free will choices involved. Thus, the variations are uncertain. Again, the only way to be able to know for sure that you are making the right prediction and the right choices associated with them is for you to have surrendered to the universal will. If you are thus living in a state of unselfish love all the time and thusly in tune with the universal spirit, you will both see far more and more clearly as far as prophecy is concerned, and you will be under the guidance and direction of the hierarchy and universal will. Thus, all your decisions will be as good as they possibly can and will be right, regardless of whether or not you can see their outcome or what the apparent outcome is. If you live that way, Father, then can miraculous things also happen? Miraculous things are always happening. People just aren't aware of it. But to answer your specific question more directly, When you have thus become an instrument of universal will, the hierarchy will sometimes do something through you or around you. Sometimes you will be aware of this taking place, or other times things will happen through you and you won't even be aware of it, or you'll just be aware of some of the particulars. There is a good example of this in the chapter about visualization and affirmations. It is a story about an experience I had with a car dealer that could have resulted in serious harm had the hierarchy not intervened and had I not yielded to universal will. In fact, if you wish, you could skip to that chapter and read the example now, then come back to this chapter, or you can read about a different type of example now in the next section. That big dealer in the sky. The following is an example, one of thousands I could give you, of how the universal spirit manipulated events through the hierarchy. This particular example shows how a life was changed, and the ripples of cause and effect forge karmic ties. Actually, because it's a brief example, it doesn't really show the extent of the changes that really took place, but it will give you an idea of the big picture involved. The next story takes place after my final year at the monastery. After attaining the final initiation, enlightenment, I had begun the easier/harder work, that of an adept, a true teacher. But I was needed in other places, so at age 21, I left the monastery and began my work. My employer was the universal spirit. No teamsters, but we had a great union. Then, as now, I wandered parts of the world, following the directions and guidance of the universal will. I owned nothing but my monk's robes, no home, no car, no other clothes, no money. I never begged, nor ever asked for anything. Yet I never went hungry, never needed a ride, never lacked shelter or a place to sleep. I always had whatever money I needed. When God is your employer and your life is truly dedicated towards serving others rather than dedicated to survival, such things aren't an issue anymore. God is the true provider of all things and provided for all those day-to-day needs for its humble servant. But everything could come through a variety of normal or strange sources. Often they were offered by strangers whom I had just met, who were going through something intense in their lives and sought out my assistance. Some just needed a shoulder to cry on. Such people had always desperately prayed or called out to God for help or guidance at some time in their lives before we would meet. Sometimes amazing things happened around/through me as the universal spirit used me as an instrument for its will. The following story is just one of many similar instances. One day I was walking through the city of Las Vegas, Nevada. I passed by a door of an office building and heard what sounded like live band music. I felt like stopping and looking in the door. As I looked in, I saw someone I knew from a school I attended as a child. He had once been my best friend. He was in a rock band that was rising to success, and they were practicing there. The space was rented by their manager specifically for practice sessions. My old friend was surprised to see me, shocked by my monk's garb, and how something indefiable was very different about me, other than the obvious appearances. As we were still greeting each other, his manager came in and handed him a paycheck from their last performance. With check in hand, he grabbed his jacket and said to me, "I'd really like to visit right now, but I have to run down to the casino to cash my check. Of course, you're welcome to come with me if you want." I said, "Fine," and we were on our way. I soon discovered my friend had become a serious gambling addict. We got to the casino, he cashed his check, then headed straight for the gaming tables. Many of you may not be familiar with addiction syndromes, especially gambling, but it is a sad and strange thing to witness. He'd gotten the scent and was so focused and preoccupied with getting his gambling fix, I may as well not even been there. To him, I almost didn't exist at that moment. The casino had a strange atmosphere, stranger than normal. It turned out that there was a dealer strike, and the dealers that were there were strike breakers or scabs. We walked up to the blackjack table and sat down. The dealer looked at me over with an unpleasant grin. With a not so subtle hostility, he told me I could not sit next to my friend unless I gambled. My friend put down $2 on the spot in front of me. The dealer said, "Fine. Now, we aren't supposed to talk about sex, religion, or politics. I'm going to talk about all three." Then he looked at me again and said, "You look like some kind of freaked out rabbi or something." I was an odd sight for a patron of Las Vegas casino. I was wearing a monk's robe, sandals, and had a beard and a long hair that hadn't been cut in many years. As the dealer dealt his cards, he began to verbally attack me with insulting questions about me and my beliefs. Interesting enough, though, all his hostile inquisitions were valid spiritual questions. If you ignored the insults they were cloaked in, insults can only upset the selfish separate self's defenses, sometimes called ego. By this time in my own life, nothing offended me. He found no target at which his equal insulting arrows could strike, so all he managed to get out of me were answers to his questions, answers given calmly and lovingly. All the time this was going on, we were gambling, but since other forces were involved, the hierarchy and universal will, I wasn't gambling at all. I was just winning every hand. I wasn't even paying attention to anything but the questions and answers. This particular casino played with the customer's cards face up, and the dealer was assuming that I was playing the standard way. Stand on 17 or over and take a card unless I signaled him otherwise. So he dealt my cards accordingly, but I wasn't playing. I just answered his questions and ignored my cards. I didn't do anything with the original $2. I just let it keep doubling with every winning hand. This table was using what's called a 4-deck shoe for the cards. It held 4 decks of cards that would get played before a new shuffle would take place. By the time it was over, I had not lost one hand, and that $2 in chip became a mountain of chips worth thousands. This alone was mind-blowing the dealer. But simultaneously, the whole time this miraculous winning was going on, we had discussed everything from creation to the ozone layer and the coming earth changes, and all my answers had rung his inner bell of truth. The dealer began to get shaky. the odds of anyone just letting a bet ride and winning every hand in a 4-deck shoe were astronomical, virtually impossible, and no one would know that better than a dealer. My vibration, composure, and answers to his question resonated within the center of his being. Combining all with this, my appearance, what people generally considered Jesus looked like, was too much for him. He was relieved by his supervisor, and another dealer took over our table. All the money was lost with his first hand from the new dealer. To me, my winning was clearly the benefit of the dealer, my friend, and a few others at the table. But my shaky previous dealer had headed off to the bar behind us and was chuggingly straight scotch as fast as he could pour. Minutes later, I sensed something behind me. I turned, and there was the dealer walking towards me like a zombie, with one arm outstretched and shaking. He came up to me and touched my shoulder as if to see if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't really there, or I was actually some delusion that came from a bottle of scotch. But alas, I was real. He turned around and went back to the bar and continued to drink. This incident had a dramatic impact on my gambling addicted friend too, but that is another story, not for this book. Many years later, I visited an organic farm in a rural community in the south central part of the U.S. A very happy, friendly neighbor came over to visit, and before too long, he told me his amazing life story. Apparently, this nice man had been a blackjack dealer in Las Vegas, and for some unknown reason, he had a total nervous breakdown while dealing during a strike and completely lost all his memory and mental programming. The breakdown left him as blank as a child, and he had to completely re-educate himself, all from a bed in a psychiatric hospital ward. He also reprogrammed himself with the help of the psychiatrist. He had a basically Freudian view of the world and didn't believe in synchronicity or such things. Yet another story. With his new outlook on life, he's semi-retired, happily breeding dogs at his little rural home in the woods. Do I need to tell you who this particular ex-blackjack dealer was? So, that was the end of chapter 10. That was part 3 of the Children of the Law of One in the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. Thank you for listening to me read this. If you have not subscribed and you enjoyed this, please take the time to subscribe so that you can get the notification so you can listen to me read chapter 11. So until then, have the most benevolent day.